is creepy.
Story 1. I grew up hearing about the Appalachian Mountains the way some families talk about bad weather, something you respect, something you don't challenge, and something that doesn't care whether you believe in it or not. My uncle lived deep in the mountains of eastern Kentucky, in a place where the road narrowed into gravel and then into nothing at all. When I was 19, I spent a summer staying with him, helping repair fences and clear brush. There was no cell service, no neighbors close enough to wave to, and at night the darkness felt heavy, like it pressed down instead of simply surrounding you. The first thing he told me was simple: never whistle at night. I laughed and asked why. He didn't laugh back. He just said, "You don't want something answering." I thought it was mountain superstition, the kind people repeat because their grandparents did. But after a few weeks out there, I stopped whistling anyway. Not because I believed him, but because the woods had a way of making you feel like you were being listened to. One night, I woke up to the sound of footsteps outside the cabin. Slow. Measured. Too steady to be an animal. I sat up in bed, listening as they circled the cabin once, then stopped right outside my window. I could hear breathing. Long, controlled breaths, like someone standing still on purpose. I waited for my uncle to shout or reach for his rifle, but the house stayed silent. Then, from right outside the glass, a voice whispered my name. I hadn't told anyone in town my name. I didn't answer. I didn't move. The breathing stopped. The footsteps slowly retreated into the woods, crunching leaves in a pattern that sounded intentional, like it wanted me to know it was leaving. The next morning, I asked my uncle if he'd been outside during the night. He stared at me for a long time before asking, "Did it sound like me?" I didn't know how to answer that. He nodded once and said, "That's why you don't answer." I left the mountains at the end of the summer. But even now, years later, sometimes when the world is quiet enough, I swear I hear my name being tested from far away, like something is checking to see if I still remember the rule. Story 2. In western North Carolina, there's a stretch of trail locals avoid after sundown. Officially, it's because of uneven ground and sudden drop-offs. Unofficially, people just say, "That's not a night trail." A friend and I decided to ignore that advice one October evening. We were experienced hikers, well-equipped, and confident in that careless way people are when nothing bad has happened to them yet. About an hour into the hike, the forest went quiet. Not peaceful quiet, empty quiet. No insects. No wind. Even our footsteps sounded muffled, like the woods were absorbing noise instead of reflecting it. That's when we noticed we were hearing footsteps behind us. Every time we stopped, they stopped. Every time we walked, they followed. We assumed it was another hiker messing around until we realized the steps didn't match either of our rhythms. Then we heard voices. They sounded human, but wrong, too flat, too slow. We couldn't make out words at first, just the cadence of speech. My friend whispered that maybe it was people from a nearby campsite. Then one of the voices spoke clearly, calling out, "Hey, wait up." The voice sounded like my friend's voice. Not similar, identical. We turned around together. There was no one there. The trail behind us was empty, but the voice came again, closer this time. "You dropped something." My friend went pale. He hadn't said a word since we stopped. That's when panic finally kicked in. We turned and ran, not caring about noise or footing, just moving downhill as fast as we could. The voices followed us the entire way, sometimes overlapping, sometimes repeating the same phrases in different tones. When we finally burst out onto the access road, the voices stopped instantly. No fading. No retreat. Just silence. Later, locals told us that sometimes the mountains practice sounding like people. They said the mistake wasn't hiking at night. The mistake was listening long enough to recognize yourself. Story 3. My grandmother lived alone in a remote part of West Virginia, surrounded by forest on all sides. Growing up, she warned us never to wander too far from the house and never to follow voices in the woods. She said the mountains had a way of borrowing sounds. When she passed away, my cousin and I went up to clean out the house. We planned to stay 2 nights. We barely made it through one. That evening, while sorting through boxes, we heard someone knock on the front door. 3 slow knocks. When we opened it, no one was there. The porch was empty. The woods beyond the yard were dark and still. About 20 minutes later, we heard knocking again, this time from the back door. Same pattern. Same rhythm. My cousin joked that maybe neighbors were messing with us, but his laugh sounded forced. Then the knocking came from inside the house. It started on the wall behind the staircase. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. We backed away, hearts racing. The knocking moved, room to room, wall to wall, never fast, never frantic, like whatever was doing it had all the time in the world. When we grabbed our keys to leave, the knocking stopped. As we stepped onto the porch, we heard my grandmother's voice from the woods behind the house. "Did you forget something?" I don't remember getting into the car. I only remember driving away with the radio blasting and neither of us looking back. The house was sold a year later. The new owners moved out within 6 months. They said it was because of structural issues. But the listing photos still show something strange, faint handprints on the inside of the walls, like someone pressing outward, trying to be heard. Story 4. In eastern Tennessee, my job required me to drive mountain roads late at night. I got used to fog rolling in without warning and animals darting across the road. What I never got used to was the man who stood by the same curve every few weeks. He wore old-fashioned clothes and never moved until your headlights hit him. Then he'd turn his head slowly, like he was acknowledging you. The first time I saw him, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. The second time, I slowed down. The third time, I stopped. That was my mistake. When I rolled down my window to ask if he needed help, he didn't answer. He just smiled, too wide, too still, and took a step toward my car. Something about the way I drove off without another word. After that, I stopped seeing him. I thought that was the end of it until one night I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. For just a second, it wasn't me. It was him, standing behind the car, smiling. I slammed on the brakes and jumped out. There was nothing there. But when I checked the back of my car later, I found muddy footprints leading right up to the trunk. I quit that job soon after. I still avoid that road. Because sometimes, when I drive mountain highways at night, I see someone standing by the curve ahead, and I don't wait to see if he turns his head. Story 5. There's an old saying in the Appalachians, if you hear something calling you by name in the woods, no you didn't. I didn't understand that until I went camping in rural Virginia with friends. We were sitting around the fire late, laughing, when one of us heard someone call his name from the tree line. We all heard it. It sounded exactly like his sister. He stood up immediately. We grabbed him and told him to sit down. He looked confused, almost offended, like we were stopping him from something obvious. Then the voice came again, closer this time, clearer. It said his name, then added, "Come here. I can't find you." That's when the fire died. Not slowly. It just went out, like someone flipped a switch. The woods filled with movement, branches snapping, leaves rustling, footsteps circling us. The voice started repeating his name over and over, changing tone each time, like it was trying different emotions to see which one worked. We stayed together until sunrise. None of us slept. When morning came, the forest looked normal again. Birds returned. The air warmed. But our friend was different. Quiet. Distant. On the drive home, he finally said something that still gives me chills. He said, "It stopped calling me when I answered it in my head." And that's why people from the Appalachians don't talk about what lives in the mountains. Because talking is one way of answering.